Let's have a really frank conversation today, guys. 95% of you, probably more, watching this, are losing poker players. Of that 95%, 80 or so percent of you have a graph where the red line goes very steeply down, making it almost impossible for the green line to ever be in the black. The reason for this is actually quite simple, but a simple problem doesn't always mean a simple solution. The problem is that as a human being, you're not cut out for poker. You're simply not. You don't have the mettle, the ambivalence to just risk a ton of your resources in one spot with a bad hand. You're not bluffing enough in big pots. You're missing out on tons of opportunities where fold equity is nearly 100%. I've been dabbling in my bankroll challenge at 100 Russian cash on GG Poker recently, and believe you me, there are spots where your fold equity is upwards of 90% if you can find the right bet size. I'm certain of this. And you're not bluffing enough, you're not calling enough in spots that are overbluffed, you're not investing enough money. It's that simple. And I know that you don't mean it. I know that you're not intentionally being nits, and you probably don't like to see yourself as a nit, but you kind of are. Because your natural human psyche is risk adverse. It's wired to subconsciously urge you away from the investment of resources. It wants to keep you alive. But in poker, that instinct is the very thing that will kill you, and is killing you. In this video, I'm going to show you 3 spots in which I was very aggressive, where I don't think any of you really are. In the spots where you'll see me attack today, I think that 80 to 90% of you will shy away from trying to win the pot, or at least won't do so in the right way. Let's get into today's video, and remember, it's not your fault. This is a natural human condition. The natural graph that you're supposed to have looks like the one on the thumbnail, with the plummeting red line and the struggling green line. We can fix it, and this video is the first step. Let's go. So this desire that tries to keep you safe, tries to protect you from losing your precious resources, you might not even know that it's happening. It's very subtle and it's very sneaky. And the impulse to be risk adverse is often so strong that it coerces the conscious mind into thinking that it's making rational choices when it's not. In this hand, we open the ace queen here with the ace of spades. This is going to become the key card later. Villain calls out of the big blind. This is 100 Russian cash, GG bankroll challenge hand. We are going to use a big bet strategy on the flop here. And we decide to bet this time. Betting and checking are both fine here. This isn't the kind of spot where not being aggressive is going to sink your win rate. Sometimes when I tell people you need to be more aggressive in certain spots, their default reaction is to just bet every time they have the chance to bet. But that's not going to work. That's called an over-calibration. I've literally seen this happen. Students go away and they're like, oh man, I bluffed off a lot of money last week. And they're like making horrible spews in spots that are just ridiculous. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to learn where we can attack pots, where fold equity is very high today, how to bluff theoretically in a solid way. We talk about this a lot more in the Carrot Poker School. Grade 1 Lecture 3 is a lesson all about bluffing. That's the whole point, and it's over an hour long. Anyway, the 6 of diamonds comes on the turn. This is a card on which we're not going to use overbetting. The reason for this is that Villain's range uncaps a little bit here. It caps a bet on the flop, not as much against the big bet as it would against a small one. Turn uncaps a little bit, makes some 2 pairs, some straights. It's not that it's horrible to overbet here. If you run this in a solver, you'll probably see both sizes being used, B75 and overbet. I just simplify to a strategy where we use this when we're betting. I don't think this hand has too much showdown value to bet on this texture. It does have the ace of spades, which is great because it stops the opponent from raising us on the turn with a nut flush draw, which is sometimes going to happen when we don't have this card. Then we would have to fold, and it does mean that on spade rivers we obviously have some plus EV bluffing opportunities that we wouldn't have without this card. That said, on non-spade rivers we're going to have a pretty clear give up. A lot of Villain's range is going to call turn fold river here is going to contain the ace of spades. Be stuff like ace 8 of spades, ace 7 of spades, etc. Hands with showdown value that don't have to raise the turn. They probably can, but they don't have to, so they'll call and then fold river sometimes. The 5 of spades comes on the river. And this is a spot where you can have 2 bet sizes in your strategy. You can have more than that if you really want, but 2 is a good starting point. Now, we've already said a lot, both on this channel and of course in the Carrot Poker School, we see this in a lot of detail, that the way you build your strategy is that your value hands are the drivers of the bus in game theory and your bluffs are the passengers. So your value bets kind of decide what bet sizes exist, and then depending on their equity, different value betting candidates will go into different sub-ranges. So here, for example, if I have a hand that I want to value bet like a straight, or let's say trip fives because I bluffed with like a 5 on the turn or something like that, then I'm going to go ahead and use a big bet but not an overbet. It's going to be like B75 or something on this river. Bad flushes, again, I don't have to overbet here. But when I have a boat or the nut flush, I can play jam. And the thing with jam is that it maximizes what I earn. Because in game theory, you maximize your EV by increasing the magnitude of the pot you win, not desperately trying to claw a call from your opponent at a slightly higher frequency. Magnitude, i.e. how big the pot is, can be exponentially large. You can have 3 times the pot. You can't have your opponent calling you 300% of the time. That's a very rough explanation of why magnitude trumps frequency. In the real world, where when you bet pot here, nobody ever bluff raises you, it's even more important to go bigger. So if you do have the nut flush here, a near invincible hand, or a full house, which is effectively the nuts, or quad fives, you should jam. You should absolutely jam. That's the highest EV play, in theory and in practice. Don't worry about the fact that they call you less often. Another reason your graph is terrible, for most of you watching this, no offense, but it is that you don't get enough value. You're so terrified of your opponent's folding that you won't just put your money in the pot, but that's what you need to do if you want to be a big winner. You've got to stick all of your money in the pot when you have a very, very big hand, because magnitude trumps frequency. If villains rivered a flush, they're gonna call it off a lot of the time. Maybe not always, but very often. And all that money you lose from villain not calling you as often with king 10, don't worry about it. You'll make it back. I promise you, you will. This video is not just about having the will to bluff it all off, like I do here, but also being able to stick it all in when you have a boat or nut flush here, and then finding a smaller sizing with your other stuff. That's how you play this spot. If you show up to this spot with the nut flush and you bet 23 because of some bullshit thought process, such as, let's find a sizing a 10 will call. This is so wrong. Now, I've heard coaches say stuff like this, and it's honestly, frankly, embarrassing. And the reason they do it is that they're not schooled, they're not educated in the way the theory of the game works enough. Because when you target, another blasphemous, horrendous term that we ban on our Discord server, it's a private server, you get in there by purchasing a Carrot Poker School grade or the full course, or by getting private coaching from me. Very, very good place to talk about the game. But anyway, we've banned the term targeting because what it does is it basically manipulates students into always imagining the opponent with a part of their range and wanting to be called by that exact hand. Why would you target a 10? Why on earth would you just try to pick a sizing you think a 10 will call? One, you don't know. Sometimes a 10 will call everything because it just doesn't believe you. It thinks you just have the naked ace of spades like I do here. But more importantly, when you go all in with the nuts, you're not trying to be called by king 10 of clubs. That hand's meant to fold in GTO, I would think. You're meant to be called by better calls than that. So stop targeting. Stop picking a sizing you think they'll call. You don't know what they'll call. You have no idea. People are underly elastic. That means they don't react enough to changes in sizing. So this is a really clear all-in. It's going to work very, very often. Sure, sometimes we'll be unlucky. We'll run into like the king jack of spades that will call us. That's fine. We roll with the punches. We really do. Villain can't have the nut flush. When we're bluffing here, having the ace of spades for the all-in sizing is mandatory. When you use a smaller sizing, it's not. So if I use like B75 here, I can have like jack 7 of hearts. Like that's okay. But when I'm going all in, I want to have the ace of spades. I want to have this positive blocker. The more bulbous your sizing in relation to the pot, the more nutted and premium your blocking properties should be. Villain folds because this is a near 100% fold equity spot. They don't have any boats. They have very few flushes. If the turn timing here, by the way, is really quick, they probably just don't have a flush. I mean, you think about raising, right? If you have like jack 8 of spades on the turn, you think about raising. If you have like king queen of spades, you consider it. Quick calls here are largely going to be capping. Going to be 9x, 10x for the most part. 7s, 8s, 6, 7, 8, 6, 8, 9, jack 9. So many hands here, 7, 9 suited, are just call folds. This play cleans up. I don't think this play is called enough. But you guys might not make this play. And the reason for that is that you don't bloody well want to make it, right? It's a horrible play to make. It feels bad because it goes against all of your human programming. But that's okay. So here's the secret. Here's how you get yourself to make this play. First off, you establish really rationally whether it's good to jam through a thought process similar to the one that I just did. If you can't do that, you're not advanced enough, that's okay. You could still say something like, well, I know in theory I can jam the nuts on the river, and I know that where there are value bets, there have to be bluffs. Ergo, this has to be an okay bluff because it has a premium blocker. So you can kind of get there in a few small steps. Once you've established that you think the play is probably good logically, and it doesn't even have to be that you're sure, then it's time to understand what your brain is doing. You're still feeling this pull, pulling you back from the edge of a cliff. Don't go there, it's dangerous. That's your resource preservation instinct trying to keep you alive. Look it dead in the face and say, nah mate, I'm not having this shit. I know what you're trying to do, I see you're trying to protect me, but here's the deal. I'm going to make peace with this bluff now. The reason students go wrong and become, this isn't too strong of a word, become traumatized about risking money and bluffing and losing and getting this vicious cycle is that instead of justifying the play rationally and accepting the consequences of it before they do it, they make the all-in in this petrified state where they've just taken a massive plunge and they hope they don't die. Hoping you don't die is not a good frame of mind for bluffing. Therefore, if you do run into King Jack of Spades, or the rare 6-5, or the slow-played quads, or some weird shit like that sometimes, and you get snapped, you're just going to go, what an idiot. Of course that was going to happen. Your brain is going to go, you were really afraid, and you did it anyway, you moron, you got what you deserved, you should never, ever, ever do that again. And by accepting that conclusion, that you should never bluff again like this, red line, poof, off a cliff, dead. Your game, your prospects, forget about it. You're not going to make it. So accept the consequences of the play before you do it. Be brave. Don't be a coward. Stand up and say, okay, I absolutely accept that this bluff, like all bluffs, may not work, and that is part of the T's and C's of the play. That is the box you tick to accept the terms of this variance. But I know that who I want to be in poker is somebody who's capable of making this play. I know that I'm somebody who's not going to be a naturally risk-adverse nit, as humans are sadly wired to be when it comes to games of betting resources. Instead, I'm going to be a brave, calm, collected poker player. I'm going to be rational, I'm going to be brave, I'm going to be poised, I'm going to have all of those virtues. And in doing that, I also have to be capable of accepting consequences, be they good or bad. So if we accept the consequences of being called here before we make this play, and we say, if I get called here, I stand by my play. That's called conviction. And that's the thing that's missing. Conviction conquers fear. Be brave, stand up, and make this play with the conviction that it's good, regardless of the consequences. If you need villain to fold here, to validate this play, to give yourself a pat in the back and justify yourself to yourself, you're screwed. Another example, we open ace-3 off in the small blind, we're called by the big blind, king, queen, 9, all spades. We can bet or check here. We bet the flop. Again, not the kind of spot that's going to make or break your win rate. Villain calls. We should usually bet here, I believe. I think we can probably check, but it's going to be low frequency. Again, I'm not using overbets in spots like this where people are very uncapped, or at least should be uncapped. You could make some arguments exploitatively at low stakes that you can overbet here with nut flush blocker and nut flush and stuff like that. But yeah, it's fine. And then on the river, this is a really cool card, so we have no showdown value here. This is the first thing to say. Just because you've hit the 3 doesn't mean that you're ever going to win. If you win here by checking, your opponent is an absolute numbskull. Like, your opponent is a buffoon and an embarrassment and a clown if you win here by checking. Because if you check here and they check back with, like, God, Jack of Spades, 8 of clubs, that is some of the worst poker I've ever seen. It's such a mandatory bluff when you're checked to here. You have like 1,000,000% fold equity. I know that's not possible, GTO nerds. Before you start explaining that to me in the comments, we want to go ahead and bluff whenever we have a lack of showdown value, a big range advantage, or a lack of showdown value and favorable blockers in a non-range advantage spot. This is not a range advantage spot because the villain has condensed twice. They've called flop and turn. So Carrot Poker School grade 2 lecture 5 explains this quite well about the out of position game. Range advantage and nut advantage is also a topic of grade 1 lecture 6, I think. We cover it there too. And basically in situations where, sorry, it was grade 2 lecture 6, that's what I meant, the in position game, that's where we actually talk about triple barreling. Where do we have a range advantage? Where do we not? This is a spot where we don't. And what that means is that we need to be a bit selective about our blockers. So our hand is amazing because it blocks the nut flush, which should slow play sometimes. Actually, it's not amazing. I take that back. The reason it's not absolutely amazing or anything is that it does block some folds as well. But for the overbet sizing, and you could probably go all in here as well and do really well, people will raise the nut flush super often, even though they shouldn't always. They probably don't have enough of it here. But this sizing is fine as well. The 3 actually unblocks all of the stuff that they fold. There's nothing in their range that has a 3 that really folds here. Maybe like king 3 or something like that at a low frequency, but that should probably fold turn sometimes with no redraw. Like on these boards, you'd rather call like 1 spade hands and straight draw hands than just call like naked king 3 on the turn. It's not going to be a very good call. So the 3 doesn't block the folding range, which is going to contain like the jack of diamonds and the 10 of hearts and cards like that most of the time. Unblocks the folds, that's good. The ace blocks obviously the nutted stuff. Does block some folds as well. They could have like, sure, ace 10 off with ace of spades here, and you are blocking that. In theory, that's probably meant to like jam on you sometimes, so it's not even a bad thing. But anyway, the point is that regardless of all of this nitty gritty GTO stuff, this play is fine. But you still have to want to make it. You still have to get here and psychologically take the plunge. You have to say, okay, I'm going to bet here, and I understand that I may get snapped by an 8 high flush that's slow played up until this point. I understand I may get snapped by 2 pair, or I might get called by a hand that has good blockers, that blocks flushes or something. Or I might run into a calling station or a maniac and just get called that way. But a lot of the time, villain has just arrived here with like king jack, no spade, and it's going to fold just 1 pair. When people have a lot of 1 pair, regardless of blockers, they're not really in the mood to just bluff catch this most of the time. Yes, this has to work a lot. You bet 1.5x pot, you need 60% fold equity. Villain needs 37% to call, you need 60% fold equity. Know your pot odds. Do you know the amount of people that don't know basic pot odds? It's actually ridiculous. It's actually just like not okay, but nobody ever makes that point. I'll say to a student who purports to be an advanced player playing like 100 NL online, which is not like an easy game these days necessarily, depends on the site. But I'll say to them, okay, so how much equity do you need to call here? And they don't know. They don't know fold equity milestones. They don't know equity milestones. These are basic things that I used to teach in like 2012. Like, you have to know this stuff. So 60% fold equity is pretty easy to come by in a spot like this. If I had to guess how often this works against humans, I would say 70%. Easy. High 60s, 70%, something like that. That doesn't feel great. That still entails a ton of call. The other thing you always have to remember is that your bet has a certain target work percentage, the percentage it has to work at when you're bluffing. And here that's only 60 to break even. You're risking 1.5 to win 1. So your 1.5 becomes part of 2.5. And to get the 1.5 back, you need 60% of the 2.5 back. That's why it's 60%. Visualize it. Get that into your head. You need to know that. It's not that we think this will always work. It's not that we've done something wrong if it doesn't work. It's not that we need 80 or 90% folds. You need 60. So if you're getting 65% fold equity, which is really easy here in this spot, then you're making a profitable investment. So I think this is good. The 3 is not showdown value. It's a nice unblocker. The ace is okay. It's got positive, negative things going, but when you use a really big sizing, it's very good to block the nuts. So I like this. Final spot. This one isn't about overbetting or shoving a river. It's about opportunism. It's about being a poker vulture. I made a video once, a long time ago, called How to Be a Poker Vulture. By a long time ago, I mean like a few months ago. The idea with vulturism in poker is that you are sat there and you wait for the carcass and then you swoop down and you feast on the carcass. Lovely imagery. That's what vultures do. And it's really important to understand that so much of your win rate comes from medium-sized pots that you're picking up at way higher a frequency than you're supposed to. I'm going to say that again because it's such an important poker fact. If you want to clamber your way out of this hellhole microstake or low stake that you're stuck at, you have to understand that tons and tons of your win rate comes from winning medium-sized pots through aggression at a much higher frequency against humans than you're meant to against robots, against Pile Solver or GTO Wiz, the cool kid of the solver class. Yo man, I'm GTO Wiz, man. Yeah, that's what GTO Wiz was. I'm gonna shut up. 13, squeeze it up. Okay, fine. In the small blind, called by cutoff. 756 rainbow. A horrendous spot for range. So the student that goes off having watched this video and goes, yeah, I'm gonna aggress, innit? Pete said be aggressive, yeah? And like bets the flop here for pot. Okay, you can maybe do that sometimes. You should have some bluffs here if you're building a betting range, but the simple way to play 756, a board that is monumentally better for the opponent than for you, where your fold equity is low, where villain has the nuts like a bunch of the time and you have a ton of crap that he doesn't have, like ace king of clubs, you should just check everything. Check range here. Totally fine simplification. Let's check range. Let's see what happens. Let's see if there's a vulturous spot that pops up soon. Aha! Villain is meant to check back a balanced range. The plot thickens. Are people at 100 Russian cash on GG Poker checking back a balanced range? No! No, they're not. Because their red lines are going like this. Their red lines are your red line. They are you. This is you. You are villain 4. And villain 4 probably doesn't have a protected checking range. But Pete, what if you're wrong? What if he does? Won't we get crushed? No. If he has a protected checking range, you'll do okay. Even if you like bluff the turn, it's not going to be a horrible thing to do. With 2 very good overcards, a very strong pair draw, to jacks or 10s or 9s or one of the slow play hands that villain's meant to find sometimes. So here, because our range is meant to be this incredibly polarized thing, that's either 2 big cards that are doing really badly like King Queen and don't have much showdown value, or it's going to be aces, kings, queens, jacks, you should use a really big sizing. Because again, the value hands are driving the bus and the bluffs are the passengers. The bluffs don't get to choose where the bus goes. They hope it goes in the right direction, but they don't get to choose. The driver does that. I guess through capitalism in the free market and knowing which bus stop you go to and paying for certain bus tickets, you do in some way choose where the buses go, but that's a different thing. We bet nearly pot here, and my thinking is simply that in GTO I'm pretty sure I can bluff one of the best pair draws. I think if I unblock spades, I can bluff more often, but who cares about that shit? That's neither here nor there. I will always have 2 overs here to villain when they check back flop, pretty much. I don't think sets have the stomach to check back here. Sets should slow play. We know this. At low SPRs, sets should sometimes slow play. 8-9 should sometimes slow play. There should be some checking going on. It's too counterintuitive. So again, let's go back to our vulture statement. The vulture harvests more medium-sized pots where fold equity is way higher than it should be. Exhibit A. Fold equity is higher than it should be. I can't imagine this is bad in theory, or at least not that bad. And I think it's going to be overfolded. I think villain is here with way too much ace, queen, ace, jack, king, queen, things like this. Not enough 8s, not enough 9s, not enough sets, not enough straights. If he does call, okay, maybe I'll jam the river. Maybe there's still not enough sets and stuff. Maybe the pairs will overfold. I'd need to think about it. Maybe they won't. But this spot on the turn, this is a hot spot. This is where we make money. It worked. How often does it have to work? Well, checking has some EV here. This isn't the end of the hand. We could hit the river. We could win somehow. So it's going to have to work a reasonable amount of time. At the same time, we still have equity though. So the MDF here, sort of minimum defense frequency for villain against pot, is obviously 50%. It'll be less than that because villain is in position and needs to stop us from just harvesting tons of money with nothing. Usually when you're in position against a bet like this, you'll defend, I would guess like 55% of the time they'll defend here. In GTO. 45% fold equity. That's all we need for this bet to be reasonable. In practice, I think we have more fold equity than that. I think we might have upwards of 50. So again, just a vulturous spot, sitting on the cliff, seeing the carcass, swooping down, feasting, saving the red line, overriding the natural human inclination to be a giant fucking nit. Win pots. Save your red line. Realize that you're wired to be a huge nit. Understand that it's not your fault yet, you're not powerless over it either, but do understand that it takes time to change your ways. This video is not going to fix you overnight. You still need theory. You need to combine this kind of mental game coaching with solid theory, and the best way to do that, I honestly believe, and in the opinion of everybody in my Discord group that's ever taken the course, is to get the Carrot Poker School on carrotcorner.com. It will do wonders for your baseline, it will give you the bedrock your game needs to rest on, and all of this sort of mental game coaching can be built on top of that. You will not change anything results-wise if you continue to play the way you're naturally wired to play. That's why 95% of you are losing players watching this. I won't fix that many of you, because poker's hard, but if I can fix a few of you over time, if you buy the Carrot Poker School, I think the percentage shoots way up, but I can still help you guys, even if you're just watching free content, you're not ready to make an investment like that. Watch these videos and really be intentional that you go off and apply them. Don't just watch them for entertainment plus learning. Watch them, and then the next time you sit down to play, try to remember the message, go through it in your head, do it every time. You're just a human, you know? Your brain is fallible, it forgets shit. Reinforce it. If you remember one thing from today, it's that fear is holding you back and that's not your fault and you can fix it. Pay attention to that fear, be mindful of it. That's how you're going to be able to disarm it. Make peace with bluffs before you make them. That way if they don't work, you don't fall into the trap of I will never do that again, because that's the trap most of you are in that have that red line. See you next time.